Guten Morgen, it's Morgan. Welcome to Murder in the Morning. Get ready with me while I talk about a true crime story. So this story was recommended by my parents, and by recommended I mean they probably didn't think or want me to do this, but they were like, have you heard about this story? And I hadn't, so I was like, let's look it up. And let's just say it is intense, so there's going to be a lot of trigger warnings. Starting off, this does talk about depression, psychosis, postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis, suicide, eating disorders, children, everything. Just everything is involved, okay? Also, I got bangs, if you didn't notice, so it's a little hard to, we're gonna have to figure out like the whole put makeup on my forehead and the eyebrows and just all of that stuff, even kind of mascara. So my vibe for today is gonna be clean, soft girl, natural-ish makeup. So those are kind of what I'm going for. So yeah, let's get started. This story is going to be about Andrea Yates. She was born as Andrea Kennedy. She was born July 2nd, 1964, which, fun fact, is the same year my mother was born. So I'm glad I have the mother that I have, especially after listening to this. So she was born in Houston, Texas. She was the youngest of 5 children. She was pretty successful in high school. She was swim team captain. She was valedictorian, and she was on National Honor Society. And she was liked by her siblings, by her family. She got along with her family pretty well. And she was very religious. It was not all sunshine and rainbows for her. No. She had an eating disorder, bulimia to be exact, as well as depression, and she had discussed thoughts of suicide with her friends in high school. They later told authorities that she had discussed thoughts of doing it. You know, she definitely had a rough time, even though she was valedictorian and she did graduate, obviously. She went to the University of Texas after graduating for School of Nursing, and she didn't really date until she was 23. So she was not the type to ever go up to a guy to ask them out or anything like that. And that relationship that she had at 23 didn't end well. She was pretty broken up about it, pretty, sad. Anyways, so when she is 25, it's the summer of 1989, and she is chilling by the pool at her apartment complex where she is a registered nurse, and she sees good old Russell Yates, who was also 25. So they determined that they had a lot in common because they were both religious. I just sprayed that all over the microphone. They were both religious and both 25, and surprisingly enough, she talked to him first. So she was like, oh, hi. And she never initiated with guys, ever. That was kind of crazy that she was like, I like him, so I'm going to talk to him. And that was definitely not something that she would ever do or a part of her character. Shortly after meeting, they started dating and they moved in together, and they got married April 17th, 1993. And they vowed to have as many children as nature would allow, which is totally fine, especially since they're both on the same page and you do you. But if they had just followed their own advice and done as many as nature would have allowed, this would have ended up very differently. So they get married, they move into a 4-bedroom house in Friendswood, and they had their first child, Noah, on February 26, 1994. And soon after, they moved to Florida, and Rusty got a job there, and they relocated to a trailer. This was quite the adjustment for Andrea. Obviously, they went from a 4-bedroom house to a pretty small trailer, and she soon after had their next child, John, on December 15th, 1995. So now they have 2 kids in Florida, and he hits up this old friend that he had at that he met at Auburn University, and it was this Methodist preacher who, came to the school to preach to the college students. And he said that, college students were the perfect people to preach to because they were young and still moldable, and, they were on their own now and were questioning everything. Rusty really liked him at the time, and so they reconnected. Andrea got to meet him and they talked and everything. And the problem with this friendship was that Michael Warrenicki, I think that's how you pronounce it, he was a fire and brimstone preacher. So with a very negative look on women in general. He thought that Eve had ruined everything for all women and that we were all basically screwed because of her. And that no matter what we did, we'd be terrible mothers, terrible people, and that our children were going to be punished for our disobedience, sins, whatever. So unfortunately, Andrea really took this to heart. She wanted to be good enough for her husband, for Michael. She wanted to be a good mother. She wanted to be a good person, but no matter how hard she tried, it didn't seem to be enough for Mr. Warrenicki, because he wrote her a letter, supposedly. She said that he wrote her a letter, but the letter has not been found, so, that she was a horrible mother and a horrible person, and no matter what she did, she would never, be good enough, and that her kids were doomed and that they would not go to heaven because she was their mother. He straight up said that to her in a letter. So because of this, she was not doing great mentally, and she was living in a trailer with 2 children, and she didn't have any family or friends really in Florida, so she was pretty isolated, and she decided to homeschool her children, which just fed into her isolation. And then they moved back to Texas, but they decided to still live in a mobile home because Rusty wanted to live light and follow the instructions, the preachings of Mr. Warrenicki, because he said that we should live modestly and with below our means, because the Yates family was very financially stable. So Rusty was like just trying to, live small, but that's not ideal for a growing family, a family that wants to have as many children as possible as nature would allow. That's, not great for that type of family. They had their 3rd child, Paul, who was born on September 13th, 1997. And shortly after that, they bought a bus from Michael Warrenicki. So they had a little bit more room, but not really. And then Andrea had a miscarriage, and then she gave birth to their 4th son, Luke, on February 15th, 1999, which, fun fact, is the same year that I was born. So, kind of cool. But after she gave birth, she started suffering from postpartum depression and psychosis. Rusty came home from work one day, June 16th to be exact, and noticed that Andrea was chewing her fingernails, and she was very agitated and not doing very well. And the next day, she attempted suicide by overdosing on trazodone, which is an antidepressant. Once that happened, Rusty admitted her into the Methodist hospital, where she was diagnosed with severe depressive disorder and was given more prescription antidepressants. However, a month later, July 21st, she made another suicide attempt where Rusty came home and she had a knife to her throat. And she basically was begging him to let her die, to let her kill herself. 1, because she was depressed, 2, because she was suicidal, and 3, because she thought that she wasn't, a good person, a good mother. He admitted her to another hospital. This one was more meant for mentally ill patients, rather than just a normal hospital. And she was given Haldol. I'm horrible at pronouncing stuff, just so you know. It seemed very effective. And then they moved into a house to help her condition more, and that seemed to stable her. But she was instructed by her doctors to not have any more children, because with each child it's just going to get worse. It could get worse, and they didn't want to risk her harming her children or herself further. So she was, instructed to stop having children, especially since the medication that she was on, she would have to stop taking in order to have the child healthily, For a time, Andrea said that she didn't even want to have relations with Rusty because she didn't want to risk getting pregnant and then risk hurting her children. But Andrea says that Rusty convinced her, said that she was a good mom, that she was doing better, and that they should have more kids. And so Andrea decided to have another child, and she stopped taking her medication so that she could have the baby. And on November 30th, 2000, their fifth child, baby Mary, was born. If you can't tell, all of their kids were named after Bible characters. After she had Mary, she got back on her medication and she was doing well. It wasn't until her father died, March 12th, 2001, that Andrea kind of got thrown for a loop, which will do that for most people, but not to the extent it did for Andrea, unfortunately. In the next few months after her father died, she stopped feeding baby Mary, who was only she was less than 6 months old. So she was about 4 months at that time. She stopped feeding her, and when she would feed her solids. And this isn't carrot purees or baby food. This is like a hot dog, something that baby Mary definitely cannot eat, and she would start choking. So she almost choked the baby to death while giving it solid food. And she started reading the Bible feverishly. She was becoming obsessive and wouldn't stop talking about the teachings and the preachings of Michael Warnicki. And her family could tell that, something was going on. So she was hospitalized again on March 31st. So only 2 weeks after her father died. And the doctor had originally refused to give her the medication that had worked so well on her. He just didn't think it was a good idea. And then she was re-hospitalized on May 4th and told her mother-in-law. So she was hospitalized because they caught her filling up a bathtub, and I guess they thought that was sus. But they thought she was going to harm herself, and she told her mother-in-law that she filled the bathtub because she might need it. But she was released 10 days later under suicide watch. The doctor again discontinued her use of the Haldol. So even though she had been taking it for her treatment at the hospital, he had her stop taking it and told Rusty to watch her around the clock and to not let her be alone with her children. To not let her be alone, period, but also not alone with her children. Rusty, I guess, didn't understand that, and he wanted her to gain her independence back, and he thought that if he let her, be a mother again, that, it would just come naturally like it had before, and that she'd be good, and that slowly giving her trust would help. He decided, and he told her this, that he would start leaving her alone at an hour at a time. And he told his mother, hey, I'm going to leave for work. You need to come over in an hour to help Andrea with the kids. So on June 20th, 2001, he went to work and told his mother to come after an hour. And within that hour, Andrea locked up the family dog. She filled up the bathtub. She grabbed 5-year-old John and drowned him. And she had given all the kids cereal and put on a show to keep them occupied. So she grabbed John, drowned him, and put him on her bed. And then she grabbed Paul, 3 years old, drowned him, and then Luke, 2 years old, and laid them all on the bed. And then she grabbed 6-month-old Mary and drowned her, but she left her in the bathtub floating. Noah, 7-year-old Noah, gets up and is walking past, and he sees baby Mary floating in the bathtub, and he said, what's wrong with the baby? What's wrong with Mary? He said it to his mother, and she panicked, obviously, because she's trying to kill them. Well, and Mary's dead. So she tries to grab Noah, and he runs, and he almost makes it out, Andrea said, but she stopped him. And while she was drowning him, she said that he fought, and he came up for air more than once and really, tried to survive. Mary was still in the bathtub at this time. So as she's drowning, her youngest is already dead in the bathtub. So then she leaves Noah in the bathtub and puts Mary in the arms of her brothers. And then she calls Rusty and says, you need to come home. There's something wrong with the kids. You need to come home immediately. And then she calls 911. And this is what the call with 911 was. 911 dispatcher, what's your name? Andrea Yates. What's the problem? I just need him to come. Is your husband there? No. Well, what's the problem? I need him to come. I need to know why we're coming, ma'am. Is he standing there next to you? No. She? Pardon me? Are you having a disturbance? Are you ill or what? Yes, I'm ill. Do you need an ambulance? No. I need a police officer. Yeah, send an ambulance. What's the problem? Hello? I just need a police officer. So when the police arrived, they said that she was in a catatonic state where she basically just had no emotions. She was just kind of there. And the police that arrived on the scene, they were crying. It was very traumatic to see, obviously, and to just know, because it was their own mother who killed them. And so obviously that is very hard to grasp and to think of. And when Rusty came home, he was in shock and crushed. Obviously, they take Andrea in, and she confesses to the killings, and she says that she had to do it because the kids were doomed, and that the devil had taken hold of them, and the only way to release them from this was to kill them. And so she confessed to everything, and she said how she, put the dog away, all of that stuff. She knew that killing her children was illegal, but she believed it was saving them. So she thought it was worth it, The prosecuting attorney tried to say that this was premeditated. She had admitted to thinking about doing this for 2 years and had just finally gotten the opportunity to do it. Also, when she was hospitalized that last time for filling up the bathtub and they thought it was because she was going to hurt herself, she admitted that it was actually, she was planning to kill the kids that day. So this was very premeditated. She put the dog in the kennel to stop it from interfering. She knew that this was wrong. So that was the prosecution's side. And the defense said, no, she is mentally ill. She is insane. She was led by this Warrenicki guy. Her husband was supposed to supervise her and he didn't. The doctor wasn't giving her the medication that worked on her. So all of this stuff, it's not her fault. She's insane kind of thing. And the only reason why they couldn't take that not guilty because by reason of insanity was because she does know right from wrong. She admits that. She said, I knew it was wrong, but to me, I was doing what needed to be done. And one of her psychologists said that the reason she didn't get police involved before, or a preacher or anything to come take the children or take care of her, was because of shame and guilt. Now, I don't know how that works. If you feel so much shame that you're a terrible mother and guilt, why replace that with the shame and guilt of killing them? It just doesn't make sense to me. The prosecution was cross-examining one of the psychiatrists and said, oh, so did you know that she watches Law and Order? And they were like, okay, she watches Law and Order, I guess. And they're like, oh yeah, she watches it a lot. She loves Law and Order. Did you know that a few weeks prior to the killings that there was an episode about a mom who drowns her children in the bathtub. Didn't know that? And they go, no, I didn't know that. I haven't seen that episode. And they're like, well, she did. Because she's such a huge fan of Law and Order, there's no way she would have missed that episode. They're saying that she definitely watched this episode. The lady in the episode, she gets away with it by reason of insanity. So they're thinking, she watched this episode, she got the idea, she's doing the insanity thing just like the chick in the episode did. So it's definitely premeditated. And the psychiatrist is like, well, if that's true, if everything you said is true, then yeah, she's guilty. Then yeah. And the jury thought the same thing. So the jury declined the death penalty, and even though it was sought by the prosecution, and she was sentenced to imprisonment for life with 40 years in jail before qualifying for parole. So 2041 is when she would have qualified, would have been eligible for parole. But one of the head people in the show of Law and Order was like, excuse me, no such episode ever existed. I don't recall an episode even remotely like that ever existing. So there's no way that she would have been able to see that and, plan her children's murder off of it. So after they do a little digging, they determined that no such episode existed. So that called for a mistrial. After going through the whole trial again, the jury decided that she should be sentenced to a mental hospital, and she was found not guilty by reason of insanity in July 2006. She is reviewed for release every year, and every year she waives that release, but she has requested to leave for church on Sundays. Just a little fun fact, Rusty ended up divorcing her in 2005 and remarried someone named Laura Arnold, and they had a son together. And this marriage also ended in divorce by the wife. She requested it in 2015. So Rusty says that he doesn't blame Andrea, that he's not mad at her. He obviously is hurt and sad about what happened to their children, but he thinks that it was just a combination of, the postpartum, the depression, and Satan. So he believes that Andrea was weak and Satan took a hold of her, and that's why that happened, and he doesn't blame her. Andrea, she does, after being on the correct medication and being in a mental hospital all this time, she does feel guilty and shame, and she feels horrible, and she said that she still talks to her children and she feels bad. My take on this is I'm kind of in the middle. I don't think she should be allowed to leave ever. I don't think she should get even the opportunity to decide to stay. Each year when her case gets reviewed and she waives the right to leave, I don't think that should be a thing. I think she shouldn't have the choice to leave at all. But I don't think she should be in prison. I think that sending her to a mental hospital is a good idea because that is where she can get the help that she needs. But what she did was horrible and absolutely tragic. I can't even imagine the one person you're supposed to trust literally chasing you and then killing you. Is just horrible, especially as they were all 7 and under. Like the 3 youngest were 3, 2, and 6 months old. That is just horrible. And I definitely think she knew what she was doing because she had been planning this for 2 years. I think it was definitely premeditated. She knew right from wrong, but jail I don't think is helpful for her, but I don't think she should be allowed to leave ever. Because what if she gets out, stops taking her medication, and decides to do it to other parents that she thinks are unfit? The worst thing I think about all of this is that she wanted to have these children. She chose to have these children, and her goal was to have as many as possible as nature would allow. And so the fact that she wanted these children and did this to them is just horrible. I just think she had a responsibility, obviously, as a parent. I think Rusty, the doctors, everyone had a responsibility to take care of these kids and do what was ever necessary to protect them. And just like how those cops needed therapy and were crying on the scene, I'm sure this was a very, very hard trial. And I'm sorry if this was traumatizing to you. As someone who wants to be a mother someday, I think it is important for people to know about this story and to, see the signs and take mental health very seriously, especially postpartum depression, anxiety, psychosis. It is interesting that it wasn't It wasn't until her father died that it really set her over the edge. So I don't even know if I'd particularly say this is because of postpartum, because that wasn't for months afterward. So it's just a really crazy story, horrible, very sad, but I'm gonna hopefully be doing a St. Patrick's Day one next time. And I think that's why it took me so long to do this video, is because I didn't really want to talk about it necessarily, but I felt like, you know, it was a story I hadn't heard before, and I think it's important to talk about, to bring awareness to, and let me know what you want me to talk about next time. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Put mental health first. I mean, not if it requires killing your children. Don't put that first, obviously. But yeah, have a good day. Talk to you next time.